Looks like in that photo I had a little bit of hair left on the side, but I was taken a year ago. Thank you for having me as well. I think you'll see some similar themes. I'm going to start off talking about kind of what's going on nationally and indeed worldwide with the industry, and then drill down also into some Raleigh-Durham area specific matters. Now, it was mentioned that Peter co-authored a book on the airline industry. It's also the case that I was once working on a book about the airline industry, but I ran into a problem. No matter what I did, I just could not get past chapter 11. Thank you. Thank you. Just kidding. Okay, so big picture, there's some good news out there, which is we are in a period of recovery of growth of seats to the marketplace. Domestic seats are on the left. This is average per day by year. Domestic seats supplied, according to the schedules, are up 90,000 per day year over year to their highest level since the recession. Internationally, they're at an all-time high, up 20,000 per day year over year. So international seats being supplied out of U.S. airports to any non-U.S. destination, all-time high, and domestically highest since 2008. So that's good news and quite a big jump year over year. Now, in terms of who's growing, I read a lot in the papers about cutbacks and this, but the reality is, certainly in 2015, everyone is growing. Everyone is growing. You see the most rapid growth here on the left. This is year over year for the second quarter, according to the schedules. Across the board, these carriers are growing 5.6% the second quarter for domestic available seat miles. Spirit is growing the most, Virgin America the least, but everyone across the board is in growth mode right now. And again, that bodes well, but the flip side, as Peter said, even though everyone's growing, they're looking at the next best opportunity for that shell, for that aircraft and those people. So in a way, while it's good news that carriers are in growth mode, it also makes your jobs, in some respects, a little tougher because you really have to compete to make yourselves that next best opportunity. Now, like other responsible businesses, and this room is filled with those, balanced allocation of capital to benefit all your stakeholders is critical. For most businesses, that means customers, employees, and investors. For customers right now, the carriers are very focused on fleet renewal, and in some cases expansion, and improving the product at all stages of the journey, from the booking process to checking in at the airport to in-flight, waiting at the gate, all through. That's also helping achieve operational reliability as new airplanes come in and work toward our environmental objectives, which include carbon neutral growth starting from 2020 to 21, and restoring in a return-justified manner air service levels or capacity. For employees, that's meant restoring or increasing wages and benefits, job security, of course, shoring up pensions or comparable underfunded retirement liabilities. For investors, we're talking about reducing debt and returning cash to shareholders. I'll give you an example just for American here. Issued its first dividend as a corporation since 1980. Since 1980. That's just mind-boggling. For many companies in this room, I think issuing dividends is routine, and of course, many of you own stock, and receiving dividends is routine and welcome. So that's the kind of transformation this industry is going through. Now, the other thing, as you have improving finances, you're able to reinvest in the customer experience, most of which is through fleet renewal, but there are other things as well. Capital spending has been rising with the airlines' balance sheets improving. In billions, we'll approach $16 billion for 2015. In 2014, it was $13.9 billion for 10 publicly traded U.S. carriers, or exceeding $1.1 billion per month. Other ways to think about that capital spend, the equivalent of $19 per passenger and plane, 85% of our operating cash flow. Last year, that included delivery of 317 aircraft. That will rise this year, based on the order books, to 367 aircraft. Again, just for these 10 carriers, roughly one new airplane coming into the system a day. At year end, there were firm orders for more than 1,800 aircraft valued at $94 billion. As I said, working with our airport partners like Mike here is critical. Since 2008, more than $70 billion in capital improvement projects at the nation's 30 largest airports have been completed, are underway, or have been approved by U.S. airlines and their airport partners. I've given you some examples here. And of course, you have the beautiful Terminal 2, which I enjoyed on arrival yesterday. As I mentioned, after a decade of sharp, sorry for the top being cut off, I think the translation from my computer to another version, but they'll be posted online. U.S. airline jobs on the rise. We had very sharp cuts in the past decade. From 2000 to 2010, our U.S. passenger airline workforce fell 27%, 142,000 full-time equivalent jobs. It's very heartwarming to me and to the workforce that we've added back 6,300 jobs over the past 4 years as finances have improved. That's a very positive sign. You're all aware that the last decade was brutal financially for this industry. That resulted in the amassing of substantial amounts of debt. Over the past 2 years, airlines have been able to pay down about $16 billion worth of gross debt, bringing their debt to about 41% of revenues, and that is something they are keenly focused on. The first thing you do as a responsible household is you try to pay your bills. You pay down the student loans, you pay down your mortgage, and if the country is smart, we pay down our national debt too. So that's just normal housekeeping. That was a fiscal statement, not a political statement, by the way. Now, this, as you know, it is the birthplace of aviation. I can even say that as Ohioan, don't get me in trouble for that. FAA analysis, and I know you've done some estimates here at the local universities. FAA does a state-by-state analysis available on the website, ranks North Carolina 11th or 12th nationally in aviation economic impact. When you look at gross state product, $14 billion a year, personal earnings, and about 234,000 jobs that in some way in the state are attributable to the role aviation in the state. And I should mention, by the way, it is that when we talk about O&D market, origin and destination, it is important to remember the D part of that too, the destination. And North Carolina, of course, in addition to growing local economies, also is an attractive destination, which is certainly factored in by the carriers to air service planning and evaluation. Now, I know many of you are familiar with this, but it's an important backdrop just to set up the current air service discussion. RDU, of course, was a hub for American Airlines roughly from 1987 to 95. Using 3 connecting banks, again, the importance of connecting traffic, it competed with other then mid-Atlantic hubs. Remember that networks compete, and networks compete obviously through linkages of hubs, such as Atlanta, Baltimore, Charlotte, Dulles, Philly, Pittsburgh, at that time primarily for north-south traffic flows along the eastern seaboard. Significant competition from other regional hubs, the 1990-91 recession ultimately led American to de-hub RDU. Midway took over as the hub operator in the mid-90s, was ultimately squeezed by competition, 2001 recession, and the post-9/11 drop in traffic. So some current route planning considerations for the RDU community. The local population and corporate revenue base, of course, is large enough for a variety of carriers to link the community as a spoke to their hubs or provide selective point-to-point service. And we know Delta, for example, has been growing Raleigh-Durham as a focus city post-Delta Northwest merger. There are synergies of traffic flows allowed it to make RDU a more viable focus city. A local market, you know, well, is desirable due to its affluent demographics and businesses, and I should mention here, I'm sorry, I'm remiss, as well as the strong university systems, which are very important both for originating and destination traffic. Now, when contemplating growth, airlines will look at such things, of course, the population size and characteristics, but also they'll look at the quality of current air service. What's the nature of competition in the area? And importantly, revenues are very important, but it's got to be profitable, so you have to look at the costs of serving the location. That could be the cost of serving the airport itself. It could be the local fuel in terms of the fuel supply competition in the area, the infrastructure that allows multiple fuel suppliers to compete, and state and local taxes, of course. And they will also look at the opportunity to optimize returns on capital, again, with people and aircraft versus other opportunities in the network. Remember, it's about that next best opportunity. So let's come back for a moment to that RDU Paris example. Well, and let's suppose we're going after a foreign flag carrier, of course, like Air France. For Air France, they will look at that not only in terms of, well, first of all, do I have the right airplane to serve Paris RDU? But also, it's not just, if I'm thinking about an incremental use of an airplane or acquiring a new airplane, I'm not just looking at Paris RDU versus other Paris US or Paris North America. It's other opportunities to use that aircraft from Paris or somewhere else to any other part of the world. So it is indeed competitive use for very expensive assets. So again, let me just elaborate on this last point a little bit, that this is critical. They would need the right size airplane to serve any given route successfully, especially in a market where there's not a lot of local traffic. You can't risk using an aircraft that's too large. So generally speaking, the smaller the aircraft, like a regional jet, is lower risk flying. You start getting toward a 747, it's very, very risky. There are certain, this is an important concept, and I know your air service development folks are quite aware of this. Over time, developments in aircraft technology can open up possibilities for routes that were not previously viable. Sometimes that can happen through mergers too. Let me give you a couple of examples. Northwest had suspended certain Detroit nonstop Asia routes for many, many years. One example was Detroit to Seoul, Korea. Upon merging with, now Northwest had 747s, it did not have 777s. 777 is a smaller airplane, a more cost-efficient airplane, but still a wide body. Upon merging with Delta, Northwest, now the combined entity, had 777s. Immediately, they resumed nonstop service from Detroit to Seoul because it was economical. No change in the size of the market, but now they had the right aircraft from a cost standpoint and didn't have too many empty seats on the plane. A couple other examples with the advent of, for example, the Boeing 787, routes that would probably not be viable without the advent of the 787, JAL doing Boston-Tokyo nonstop, British Airways doing Heathrow-Austin nonstop, and thinking about the other end of the things, United doing SFO Chengdu, China, because although SFO is a hub, Chengdu is not, and is not the largest of the Chinese markets, of course. So those are things to think about. Do they have the right aircraft for it? Now, where does RDU stand kind of nationally in terms of the size of the local market, just as a city? The markets on the left, these 24 markets, all have at least 20,000 daily O&D passengers, origin and destination market. If we look on the right, that's where Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill stands as number 38 in the country among US airports in terms of local. That's about 12,000 passengers per day each way, or PDUs, as Peter referred to. So it's not the largest, it's not the smallest. It's a good medium-sized market. Notice, by the way, I know there's a lot of interest in Austin, and Austin is number 31 on this list. Of course, you'll look at the revenue and the demographics too, but just in terms of volumes of traffic, that's where it stands. I also wanted to look at Raleigh-Durham compared to some comparable size statistical areas as defined by US Census. I looked at the greater Cincinnati area, Milwaukee, Austin, Nashville, and Virginia Beach, Norfolk. Raleigh-Durham, there in the middle, roughly comparable population. Not doing too bad, I mean, respectable amount of air service given its size, 2.86 scheduled seats per capita, 41 nonstop destinations, and but also impressively 177 daily flights, which is even more at the moment. This is based on the schedule for this coming July, by the way, with Allegiant now included, more than Austin. I know it's never enough, but you should know that it's a respectable amount at the moment. I would not consider it underserved, even though there's room for growth, to be sure. So those 177 flights to 41 destinations, here's how it carves up by carrier in terms of number of flights per day. On the left, fairly neck and neck in there on frequencies between Delta and the combined American US Airways. On the right, seat share, roughly 3 equal parts there with American, US Airways, Delta, and Southwest, and then we have United at 9% of the departing seat share, plus you have, of course, JetBlue, Frontier, Allegiant, Air Canada. Again, the importance of the hubs and connectivity to offer you these single connections and lots of nonstops to these large markets. The most frequencies go to New York LaGuardia, followed by Atlanta, Philly. The point of this slide, here's the 41 spokes and the number of flights per day. They include 3 international destinations and just about all the US hubs. As I read in the Triangle Business Journal in January, and you've heard earlier, airlines are hesitant to launch new flights without that risk mitigation, the clear in-pace demand that will guarantee minimum passenger levels. So some further thoughts on route planning. The success is going to depend on the quantity and quality of originating and connecting traffic at the other end of the route, and I think in Q&A we can talk about Heathrow a bit. Your most attractive nonstop links are going to be the hubs or very large origin destination markets like New York. The thinner or lower revenue markets can work if the airline's system-wide operating costs are low enough and the airline has a small enough airplane to match the smaller amount of traffic. Because you're well connected to numerous airline hubs, I know nonstop is preferred, but it is important to recognize there are a number of one-stop options to reach desired destinations domestically and internationally. A network planner must calculate the incremental revenue and weigh that against the incremental costs, including the opportunity costs of dedicating capacity and personnel to any new route it's considering. Again, as Peter alluded to, when evaluating transoceanic routes, which typically require at least 2 twin-aisle, very expensive aircraft and multiple crews, they're going to weigh that very, very cautiously. Of the 40 largest O&D markets to and from Raleigh-Durham, 33 enjoy nonstop service today. And sorry, the light blue shading didn't come through. But of those lacking, it starts with number 25. All the top 24 have nonstop. Number 25, Seattle, San Diego, Austin, Kansas City, and then the last 3, New Orleans, San Juan, and Buffalo. And what I've indicated here is the number of passengers per day each way. So let's, I'm sorry. The blue shading does show up if I push the button. Let's look at RDU Seattle as an example, since that's the largest market that currently does not have nonstop service. And generally speaking, the longer the distance, it becomes a little more challenging to fill that. RDU, if I look at the July schedule, which I did, RDU passengers who want to travel to Seattle this summer can choose from 70 different flights in a single day. I pulled July 15th, 70 flights over the course of the day, spanning 19 different connecting points on 4 different carriers. There's a number of possibilities there, 19 on American, 21 permutations on Delta, 17 on United, and 13 on Southwest. So 4 carriers that offer that route. Now, I do want to mention, as we close here, that I did say government-imposed costs can also be a factor. Are they the primary factor? Probably not. The demand, the revenue base will always rule. But when you're looking at that next best opportunity and you're looking at the marginal costs of each route, government-imposed costs can be a factor. So as you think about how to attract more air service, I just want this to be part of the discussion. As recognized in many other states and industries, jet fuel is a business input to us, not a retail good. The Council on State Taxation in Washington and other organizations have discouraged applying sales taxes to wholesale goods such as jet fuel or railroad diesel, which are business inputs. When you tax along the way, it can result in high prices at the retail end and can discourage that production, certain amounts of production. Fortunately, North Carolina already recognizes this principle in exempting railroads, manufacturing plants, power generating facilities, and marine businesses from paying the state sales tax on fuel or electricity in their operations. Right now, there's a cap, $2.5 million per company on that jet fuel sales tax. It is slated to expire at the end of the year. and it could have some implications for future air service if it allows to expire. So, in recap, it is a reasonably well-served market. In addition to links to many of the largest markets in the country and a couple outside the country, has excellent single connection access to almost every part of the country and cities throughout the world. But I do believe as aircraft technology and operating efficiencies evolve, and as your local economy continues to grow and becomes even a more attractive destination, you will have opportunities to add new nonstop service. I would say for international destinations, the most likely candidates are foreign flag carriers that have an airplane that is not too large relative to the amount of demand in the market, including any connecting traffic via the foreign hub, which is often fortified by alliance partnerships or joint ventures. Of course, as I said, keeping the airport, the cost of serving the airport specifically and the state more generally competitive, and I know you work hard at doing that, are also conducive not only to retaining the surface you have, but competing in a very competitive landscape for additional service at a time when airlines are evaluating numerous opportunities with limited assets across the system. And I just close by saying I do commend you all on having this forum and for thinking very broadly in a fresh way about economic development and the role of air service. Thank you very much.